would love to know the background and the making of the artist. And I know sax. I remember there was jazz. There was music was like your first love, and then but then how you got into all this and some of your story.
Well, I guess technically music was my second love because it was 1964 and I went to Scattergood Friends School, a very small Quaker boarding school on a farm in Iowa.
A Quaker boarding school.
I was raised in a Quaker environment, and I am one of only of the three kids in my family, of the three siblings. I'm the only one that didn't inherit muscular dystrophy.
Is that right?
Yeah, my older brother and my younger sister both were born with it, and it was a very rare. When they were born, that strain had not yet been discovered, and they were, I don't know, it was probably late 50s when three doctors, Charcot, Marie, and Tooth, finally identified this particular strain. But everybody thought that they had been born with polio, and it wasn't. But I didn't get it. My brother and sister did. My brother, we were very, very close as kids. And my brother, who was an academic, man, he was a giant, intellectually, academically. He graduated from junior high, the public junior high we went to, and went to the public high school in Chicago, and realized after the first week, I mean, he knew after the first day, but after a week of classes, the muscles in his legs and hands with this particular form of muscular dystrophy just deteriorate. Mm-hmm. And all the ligaments in your joints and all that. And then long-term is you lose your muscle, you lose your ligaments, you lose any cushions. So you're living with bone on bone pain in all your joints, throughout your body. And he just couldn't move fast enough to get to class in 15 minutes from one end of this massive building that housed 4,000 students and, to the other end of it. And one of the members of our Quaker meeting suggested to my parents, just said, "Do you know about Scattergood School? It's out in Iowa." And they were very interested, and they asked Fred if he might be interested. It's on a farm, and he was like, "Yeah, yeah." So the family went out to look at this school, and it was obvious right from the outset that it was a good place. It was a good fit for Fred, and he wanted to go. And I told my parents on the way back to Chicago, I said, I gotta go. You gotta let me go with Fred. You gotta let me go with Fred. And because I just didn't want to be away from him, Yeah. And I don't know how they did it because they were not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination then. Scattergood never did and still doesn't have exorbitant tuition. I mean, they come in low. But it was still a lot of money back then, and somehow they put it together. So I went to Scattergood, and what I didn't know from just our campus visit was that they had an art teacher who was probably one of the great teachers of his day. And he was, what I didn't know the entire time I was a student at the school was that while I was there, he was doing his graduate work 10 miles down the road at University of Iowa, doing graduate work for a very famous potter who was teaching there, Paul Soldner. And at that time in the 60s, everything in American clay was influenced by Eastern clay and Eastern perspectives.
And that's where, like, Bernard Shaw was one of the big ones.
Yeah, and he was England, But he got hooked up with, he had a show in Japan, and he got hooked up with Soji Hamada. And the two of them hooked up with Setsu Yanagi, the philosopher, and who had developed this philosophy of Mingei, which is the anonymous craftsman. And so Soji, represented the East, Bernard represented the West, and the three of them traveled the world putting out this message that, the crafts, the crafts need to be, a true crafts person knows the materials and the processes so well that it's like breathing. It's self-conscious.
It's like a language they know how to speak.
Yeah. And
Mingei?
Mingei, Mingei, Mingei. And and so they advocated for the anonymous craftsman. You don't need to be putting your ego, that you don't let your ego into this. Just, if this is the path you walk, because ultimately, if you walk back, peel back enough layers on all of that, it's that kind of Zen philosophy at its root, where there are many paths up the mountain, but they all go to the same place. And the place they're going is an enlightened state of being. So whether you're a calligrapher or an herb person or a potter or a martial artist or whatever, you're walking that path up the mountain, and hopefully you are conscious about where that path is going, and that the goal is not acquiring wealth and riches and prestige and position. It is becoming an enlightened person.
Is that where the trend, I don't know if it's still a trend, but everything was untitled. All these works were untitled in the galleries.
Well, there was that. Yeah. I don't know how much that Eastern perspective drove that.
Or just kind of dovetailed nicely.
Those guys that were, I don't know. There were, in Western art, and I'm sure it's true for the East, but I think it's, in the East, this particular thing happens in slow motion compared to the West. But, this old saying, rules are made to be broken. Well, throughout Western art history, you can see, the generations breaking the prior generations, subsequent generations breaking the prior generations, rules of engagement. And, in the arts, it was like the classicists, the neoclassicists were doing all this really tight, intense detail and very, very highly representational. And then the Romantics came along with their love of the sublime. And they're just like, no, we're not going to do that. That's not, we're going to make art based on feelings. It's not going to be this scientific process. It's going to be this organic, and what feelings we experience need to be driving the imagery. And so there was a lot of really romantic, bordering on kitsch stuff going on then. And there was some great work. Delacroix's not my favorite artist, but I have nothing but respect for him. And he was kind of the driver of that, And then came the realists, and they're just like, get out of here. And that was, I don't know how much politics, global politics or Western politics fed into that, but it was, basically the rise of the glorifying the proletariat, the worker. It wasn't about, the nobility and You know, it was about the common person and the work they did, and presenting that as something of great value, that there was integrity and value within that.
And that's like the French Revolution time
yeah.
period. What's Seurat? Is that who's the artist that?
Seurat.
Who's the one for that period?
The pointillism and the
No, I'm thinking of the wrong one. I'm thinking of a dead guy in a bathtub.
Oh, yeah. The dead guy in the bathtub.
It's okay.
Yeah, okay. But you know, then, and I'm not going to give you an art history lesson, but these were, at those times in our collective history, those were really, I mean, people were intellectually informed. You know what happened when the printing press came about and anybody could read?
Yeah.
It was like, holy shit, man.
Yeah.
That's power, you know? So these people were all about philosophy and, you know, and arguing it back and forth. But then as we got closer and closer to the 20th century, and then, you know, you had the Impressionists and then the Fauves, I think, were the first ones that, as much as the Impressionists pissed everybody else off, all the academics, the traditional painters, it was nothing compared to what happened when the Fauves and beyond hit, you know, and you got into constructivism, deconstructivism, you got surrealism, and then the Holy Grail, abstract expressionism. But, and so the rules that were getting broken and this is my personal take on, this is how it makes me feel looking at the history of rule breaking in the arts. I feel like the closer we get to the present, the rule breaking is serious, but it's almost, and it's not this, but it feels like some spoiled trust fund kid who really doesn't want to put the game controller down yet, but he has to, you know, and he's just going to pout and he's going to break something. That's how a lot of it feels to me. But, and I was really skeptical of the abstract expressionists when I first saw some of that work. But it did not take long. It was really helpful that I was an art student.
Is this still in Quaker in Iowa?
Oh.
Or is this, you?
Oh, geez, we really went far afield. So,
were you thinking these deep thoughts then?
Well, that's where I think the deep thoughts really
started.
Well, the deep thinking, I don't know when people tap in. I think most people probably have extraordinarily deep thoughts very early on in their lives.
Yeah.
And if they don't make a habit of deep thinking, it's possibly because it was so uncomfortable they don't want to revisit that. So let's just keep life simple. But in my case, just to answer that original question, finally, Scattergood had this art teacher, and he was 2 years into building with the students the ceramics facility, because the school didn't have any money. They didn't have any budget for the arts. So he would scavenge stuff, and we'd go to the city dump to get stuff. And we repurposed tables and chairs and stools and, you know, you name it, and just materials that we'd rip off of other things and put on something we were building. But we built all our wheels. We built all the kilns. We dug our clay and we mixed our clay. We mixed it. It's a very Eastern thing to do, but in pottery villages, you make certainly enough clay for the next year. But in the traditional pottery villages in Japan and Korea, they'll make enough clay for a generation.
Wow.
And they bury it in the ground and cover it. And they're working off the clay that was made the generation before. So it's extraordinarily well aged and as plastic as clay can possibly get. So, but we did all that at this school, and we were gas firing to cone 10, which was unheard of in a high school. And we were doing it with no budget, you know. But the first time, when I got on a wheel for the first time, I knew there was something special there. But I couldn't throw my way out of a paper bag. But I still recognize that this is something I don't want to let go of. But when my first pots came out of the kiln, I knew, and I'm 14 years old, but I knew I would be doing this the rest of my life.
Really?
Yeah, I knew it. There was no question. It's like, okay, and I didn't know that I would be doing it in this context.
Yeah.
It turned out I couldn't not do another job, because when I tried to do it initially as a production potter, I went to my first big craft festival in Chicago, got juried into it. It was a really big one. And after my first day there, I realized that if I was going to be a production potter, I needed to be concerned about and I needed to be aware of and making precise colors, because, you know, people, you know, color designs, color choices for home decor and whatnot change year to year. And there are designers in the background, influencers that are driving. And I'm just like, I really don't give a rat's ass what color blue you want. I'm not sure I'm even going to use blue. And I realized that I couldn't worry about making something that somebody else wanted had I love making things that other people want.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to say this.
Right. Letting that dictate your course.
It is medicine to me when it is obvious that somebody is excited about something I've made. You know, it's just like, wow, you know, because essentially we live in isolation. You may be married, you may have a harem, you know, you may be surrounded by a family of 20, you know, all of them love each other, but you are going through your life alone because there is always that. And so to see a connection with another person that is something that is tangible and true and real in your life, and you recognize that they have that, you know, it's like that spark that spans the synapse, you know, it's like, now those two moments are one, you know. So that turns me on, but I don't want somebody to come through the door and say, Paul, I need 40 mugs with this logo on them. I need them to be 10-ounce mugs. I need a chiseled lip. I need this. I'm sorry, you got the wrong person. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
You know, when I come into the studio, it's the only reason I'm still doing this stuff since 1964 when I started is because it's as big a mystery today as it ever was. But that's where it happened, at that school.
Yeah.
And but the first deep thought probably occurred when I was I know it occurred when I was either 6 or 7. And this is one of the, and when I say deep thoughts, there are a lot of things that qualify as pretty deep for a kid. But this was like the big one. And somebody older than me, a kid, but older than me, it might have been one of my brother's friends, and they were 2 years ahead of me in school. He got a hold of me one day and we were talking about some stuff, and he explained infinite time to me. in a way that I could understand. I mean, you can't understand in infinite time, technically. It's not, I don't think that's possible to fully understand it like it's tangible, because it's not tangible, it's infinite. But I got that concept, and then for whatever reason, I immediately, inside my head, I did not talk about this to this kid, I immediately connected it to death. And then that changed everything. Huh. I mean, my life from that moment forward was completely upended. What I thought, what I took for granted, you know, daily life, yeah, the ground's underneath me, the roof's above me, the clothes are on me, they're in the closet, the food's on the, you know, whatever. All that stuff was just like turned on. There was, it was like this house of transparent cards as a 7-year-old. And I couldn't sleep from that point on. I could not sleep. Because I would be thinking about, okay, I'm going to die someday, and then that's going to be forever. And what is that? So it would be a state. And I've been going to Sunday school every week, and I still, to the extent that I am humanly capable, follow the teachings of Christ every day of my life. However, as a kid, I stopped trusting anything that was said in a religious setting. And as I got older, but I couldn't sleep because I would spend hours every night, and and when I did sleep, I'd wake up in a cold sweat, trying to understand time that does not end and a complete absence of awareness. Even though I'm hearing all about heaven and, you know, and during all those nights of turmoil, I discovered the difference between, for myself, I discovered the difference between belief and knowledge. And so but I had lost so much sleep over such a long period of time. My parents finally got me. I didn't want to talk about it with anyone. But my mother finally got it out of me, and she talked to my father, and they took me to the Quaker elders, some of the older members of our meeting, and let me to talk with them about it. And that was not, they were very, very kind, but it was totally unhelpful. And then they took me to an Episcopalian priest who was a philosopher. And I didn't know it at the time, but became an atheist in his later life through his philosophy. But he was very kind. And then they took me to a Presbyterian minister. They took me to a Jewish rabbi.
This is at 7 and on.
Yeah, between 7 and 9. Yeah, but well, I'd say years 8 and 9.
Sure.
Because I kept it quiet for a while.
Yeah.
Quite a while. But yeah, and every time they would drop me off, and it was at the appointed time, and I'd go in with the person, and it always followed the same thing, you know. So you have questions for me? You have concerns about things that you want to understand more? They were all fabulous. They were, and my parents had taught me to be a very polite little boy, and I knew what so, but as they would talk to me, about death, I'd be sitting there with my little 8 and 9-year-old mind just screaming at me, they don't know any more than you do. They don't know any more than you do. I knew they were smarter than me. I knew they were more learned than me. I knew they knew tons of stuff I didn't know. But in that topic, no, because they were talking about a belief system, not about scientific fact. And that made it even worse. So that became, it was my obsession throughout childhood and adolescence.
Really?
It was an obsession. Yeah. And then when I got it and began studying art seriously, in undergraduate and then post-bac and then graduate school, it was all about that. That's all it was about. And, all the papers I did, all the research I did, if I was going to work on a body of sculpture, I was reading creation myths of indigenous cultures from all over the world, and looking at the structures of organized Western religions and Eastern religions, and so some of my very first sculptural work, and I was basically raised a potter, and somewhere around 1980, a mentor said, you should try some. You're going to be a good potter all your life, Paul, and that's fine. You make pots if you want to make pots, but you should work sculpturally.
Like work out some of these ideas.
Well, he didn't know I had those ideas, but he was a sculptor, and I think he was wanting to see what I had, what I might have in that direction. But that was like a curse. It was a blessing and a curse, The good stuff is always fairly demanding. What it demands of you is sometimes seems over the top. You got to work for the good stuff.
Yeah.
So ultimately it was a blessing, him telling me, because you don't tell a mentor, heck no, I'm not doing that. You go do it.
Right.
But I thought to myself, what do I possibly have to say that has enough value that it's just going to take up physical space? Nobody's going to eat their soup out of it, drink their coffee, serve their turkey on it, put their flowers in it. It's just going to sit there. So it damn well better have something to say that's real. Even if the person who's looking at it, that didn't, the viewer doesn't know what it is, but it's obvious that thing is speaking. Right? So what do you have to say, Paul? And that question can be distilled down to, who the hell are you anyway? Who are you really, Paul? And so that was, I wish everybody could have that exercise. And for me, it was, in a way, it was life or death, for me, with that topic. And I wish everybody could, but I had to really struggle to figure out what I was going to do sculpturally. But once I got in the door, I started, my initial sculptures were, I was looking at photographs of, everybody from the Pope to Orthodox rabbis to Yaqui shaman, and you name it. I'm just looking at I had these images everywhere, because these are people who are leading their flocks, who are supposed
guides,
direct conduits to what is invisible to the rest of us. And so I just had these images around, and I'm like, and it got to the point I was questioning my Christianity. It's like, well, what? Christians have got as much of a warring history as any other major religion, any other group. What's so special about them? Well, then you find out about Christ. I have almost no time for Christianity now, but I have all the time in the world for anything Jesus Christ had to say. Huh. I think, anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But what an incredible, it was a raucous period, because every time I walked into the studio, I had to go through it again, because I just did not trust myself, to be honest, and not take some easy route through the process. Oh, people like this, so I'll just work this way. It's like, no, that's you without your clothes on, sitting on that pedestal. So you better get it right, And but that's what everything was. Wow. And even now, I realize that with the pots are about serving others. That's what it is, and about sustenance, and that's on this side of the Great Divide. And so it's like, I feel like a cancer survivor who, you always hear, well, I didn't ever realize how rich this life was. I mean, even a breeze, or the light coming through the trees, or that, I'm so much more aware of it now that I've had this brush with death. And, well, yeah, no shit. That's great, And so I just feel like I'm hyper, and everything is within those terms now, and I'm no longer terrified of death. It's just the next chapter, but I'm not going to pretend I know squat about what happens on the other side. And I would love to, I tell Ann all the time, this is a forever gig. I mean, I don't know what's coming after this, but somehow I got to be with you, and I've had people kind of poo-poo me with that, or gently try to let me know that I'm not going to be worried about any of that stuff then. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? This perspective, this is pretty hardwired. I don't know that all of this, But the one thing that helped me get through that trauma might have been the end of high school or the beginning of undergraduate school. But it's this basic premise in science. Energy cannot be destroyed.
It's transferred.
It's transferred. Voila. It's like, yes, I do believe that my energy will exist forever, whatever forever is. And that's enough. And and it's just like these damn pots. I've probably made 20,000 or more bowls in my life. But every single one of them is another step up that mountain. I mean, it's a totally unique thing. It holds as much mystery as the first one I did. And that's the way I like it.
Yeah, that's not production pottery.
No, that is not. It is not.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Although you produce
I try to make a bunch of work, because the more you work, it's that Mingay thing. If you do it enough, it becomes like breathing. But that doesn't mean you just turn off your intellect or your critical powers of observation and analysis. It just means you don't have to worry about what position your body is in, or whether you're taking a breath or letting it out during a certain part of the process. And that's helpful, So making the same form over and over again gets it closer to an activity that is like breathing, that is unself-conscious, but that frees up the rest of your mind to really, feel the aesthetics as that line shifts ever so slightly as it's being formed. And then where that line its ending position is. You just find it, but you get to spend all this time meandering that little topographical line as that pot grows, and feeling that to know when it's done. It's magic every time.
Man.
So, anyway, I probably did all that to not answer whatever question.
No, that's exactly. That's my favorite subject to talk about. The one you just landed on. So, and it reminded me, like, deep thoughts as kids. I had a recurring nightmare when I was a kid about that same topic, where it was a king on a throne, and it's like a perspective, like linear perspective, and it was always going away. It was always the same distance away, and I was going towards I could never get there.
Oh, yeah.
And it ruined me. Like I remember it was a reoccurring nightmare, and later on I could have some interpretations that have informed my faith.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I don't think our culture recognizes the power of the young mind, the ability, its ability to perceive and absorb. I don't think we get it, because it's all there. It is a blank slate.
Yeah.
And so I do think that children can touch the edges of infinity. I think there are moments when most children do.
Yeah. The veil's a little thinner.
Yeah, but yeah. It's a magical but terrifying time of life.
Well, as you were talking, and you're sharing this, that doesn't seem like a normal response to those initiations as a kid. And I was reading this morning as I'm making my omelet, Samuel, listening to the call of Samuel, and he's like hearing this call, and he goes into Eli, what is it? And he's like, it's not me. Yeah. Next time, ask for the Lord. I say, I'm here. Speak. Just thinking you're being called as a 6-year-old, 7, 8.
Yeah, it was something. That's why I don't. Our national community, and maybe the whole Western, maybe the whole world, the entire population, in developed countries, maybe we just need everything wrapped up neat and tied with bows. But this stuff is just so complicated. Yeah, I don't know. I think we could. I think mindfulness and meditation are really, really, really good tools, but I think it's just a cultural buzz thing right now. And I don't see most people going there. We don't want to do the hard work anymore. I think delving into anything, if you deem it worthwhile, it's worth doing the work, putting in the time. I don't believe for a second that we can't turn around the housing problems in this town right now. I don't believe for a second that we couldn't clean up Waco Creek. 12 months, we could have it clean. We could support trout. That's my, we can do it. We can work with each other. The Democrats and the Republicans, the Hawks and the Doves, we can do it. The Lutherans and the Church of Christ, they can, the Jews, we can do it, but it's almost like things have to be given. We can deal with things in sound bites but X's and O's. And I think that's that's one of the reasons I am so grateful that I was led. And I think where all that came from was this whole notion of being led and what that phrase means to me, because it's real easy to say, have a blessed day, or, I've been led, or, I feel like God, but what is that? If I was led, it means there is a larger construct.
There's a leader
in play. Yeah. When I met Ann, I've had plenty of time now to think about it, but I knew as soon as I saw her, and I thought, what if you hadn't come to Iowa to do your grad work? Because they only accepted me conditionally, and that's where I met her. At the job I was working up there. And so is this all just a grand plan? Your first kid in a horrible marriage and issues with recreation and, I mean, all that, just that whole milieu of stuff. But that's a plan. But, then things just, you look back at life and you look at the trajectory and you got to figure, well, it is either dumbass luck and a lot of it, or something bigger is going on here. And I think I've hit my sweet spot with, maybe not with spirituality, but with religion, because I feel as though I exist in the presence of something that is every bit as real as I am, but so much more. I mean, infinitely expansive. And that is the position I want to be in. I don't want to ever develop the arrogance to pursue more than that, because I don't think more than that is available on this side. So I would start making my own construct. I would start building my own church. That is where I get immediately uncomfortable. And so I don't know how much of this is going to air, but I don't even attend Quaker meeting now. And I love the Quakers. And I love what they have given me, and that I will carry with me forever. I love the Catholic Church as much as it makes it difficult to do sometimes. Ann's family, generations of Catholics. I am as immersed in Catholicism in the Catholic environment as I am in a Quaker way of life. And but I can't put myself in a position where there is even the suggestion that we know what we don't know. So I tend to keep my own counsel. And that may be arrogance on my part, because, there was that recent movement in the arts where, the big philosophical question was, so the artist is shaman. So are they the prophets? Are they the prophets of this age? Are the artists the prophets? Well, there's the whole voice in the wilderness thing. You could say, well, yeah, in that context, you could say they're, it's like, really? You need to spend time figuring out? Look, artists make art. Art shows up in the world. You, who are not artists, bump into it once in a while, and you can have whatever reaction you have to it is absolutely valid. If you need to find voices, if you need to find direction, if you need affirmation, and these things, whether it's literary or performance or visual or whatever, they strike a chord and they open a door. That's magical. But let's not get bogged down in the weeds with the role of the arts, or it's like, I don't do this because my community needs me to do it. I do this because I don't have a choice. Flat out don't have a choice. But recognizing that, I want to do it in a way that, if at all possible, benefits my community. So that means bringing all my integrity to the table when I do my work, and trying to create a welcoming atmosphere and environment here, so people who stumble in to see what's going on genuinely feel welcome, and then wherever I can, donate services. But yeah, I don't know. The arts, I don't know how it happened, and it could be a leading. It could be that I was absolutely wired and tended to be that. I look at the kids, my brother and sister, and then our kids, their personalities, their perspectives, and they're so incredibly, each one is so unique. Oh, here goes another tangent. That's one of the things that really is completely overwhelming with these tragedies that are going on in Gaza and Israel and Ukraine and everywhere else. India, I mean, it's happening everywhere. Rwanda, Sudan's now starting to cook again, and South America. All we get are these 1 second flashes of an image of a crowd that's being herded off the, whatever. And there's death and destruction, and it's all these nameless, faceless people, every one of which is a miracle. So that, and the fact that I can't eat the fish I catch anywhere here, because we've done that to the water quality. And fish is good for you, and I will only grow food that is certified organic, or eat food that is certified organic, because the arsenic and the cyanide and all the toxins, cadmium, you name it, we have made sure it is everywhere. You can go to some pristine, meadow in the subarctic. No, it's there. It's everywhere. And we have done a really good job of that. And I don't think I want to take that.
That's okay. You can take it. We'll just cut it out. Take it. You're fine.
Telemarketing.
Oh.
And as much as I would love to give them my money, I'm going to hold myself back.
And I have missed this. This is what sparked the thing originally.
Yeah, you were always asking the big questions.
Well, that was kind of what I was made of, and I never darkened the door of the ceramics building or the ceramics room. I kind of passed by thinking, oh, that's where the arts and crafts is.
Yeah, well, they kept you busy in the other classrooms too.
But I took one class and I was ruined. I was like, this is
ruined.
This is home. And you mentioned that about the universe of there's so much exploration. I remember putting it in the fire and coming out, and what you see was different. Wow, this is like a really collaborative art.
Yeah.
Where you're part of the process.
Yeah, and we haven't even gone there yet. That got you. It got my attention, because it's like, it's volcanic. It's geothermal. It's, you've got every primary element You got air, water, fire, earth. Whew. Yeah. And you only get to do so much with it. But then you have to learn if you're going to, you don't just blindly throw your pieces into a kiln and turn it on and hope the fire is kind. You learn as much as you can about the clay you're putting into the kiln,
Right.
You know, how it behaves, this and that. You learn about its chemical makeup, because it's really important to know that there's chemically bound water in that clay that's got to come out during the firing, and you know, the drafts in the kiln, how you know, how dirty or how clean the flame is, and I mean the rate of climb in temperature. So you got to learn as much as you can about that. Because you're still, even with all that knowledge, you're giving your piece to this force that is so much bigger than you and can operate at levels that you can only imagine. And you don't get to be in there with the fire. So it's, So it is. It's that mystery. It's just amazing. It's amazing.
Are you mostly single firing or do you bisque first?
No, I bisque most of my stuff first. I have zero problems with single firing, but I just don't want to take the time to adjust all my glazes, because they've got to have a heavier clay content if they're going to be single fired. So yeah, I can take any glaze I've got here, but I've got to run tests on it and add more clay.
Really?
Yeah, because you've got to find the same rate of shrinkage between the clay pot and the glaze that's on it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
was it mostly usually single fired, or did they bisque in antiquity as
well? No, it was mostly single fired. Yeah.
And I was more thinking of the metaphor of life that is the kiln and the whole process. You taught me that, of just like looking for the metaphors because they're everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know if you tried to, but you did.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, one big one, you know, that whole thing, big things come in little packages. That was always so flagrantly obvious to me when I was learning to throw. You know, because it took me 3-4 times as long, no joke, to everyone else, the slowest people in my class when I was a freshman in high school, to learn how to center clay. It took me months to learn how to center clay. And my teacher thought I would have given up. You know, he just fully expected me to, you know, not darken the door of the pottery anymore. And, but I would feel it, get it a little closer, and then I'd lose it. But I felt that moment. And then, you know, a couple days later, I'd feel it again. Maybe it lasts a little longer. Or maybe I actually got the clay on center and then screwed it up opening it or whatnot. But it struck me as a 14-year-old how big those moments were. And they were, you couldn't even see the moment. You know, it's just something you're picking up through your fingertips.
Right.
And it only lasts a moment, you know, but it was like, wow, I got it for a second, you know? And I'm watching the big kids, you know, the older students just throwing pots and centering the clay like crazy. And I'm getting there, you know? And so I would always tell my students who were struggling on the wheel, if they made any progress, that is one big present in a little box.
Yeah.
And you need to enjoy that.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, it's held my attention. It's definitely, I think about if I'd done other things.
Yeah.
I think this and music, if it was really a toss-up between this and music, and for years I thought it was going to be music. As the primary.
And you were saxophone, is that right?
Flute.
Okay.
Flute, yeah. And, but if it had gone that way, yeah, I'd be playing today. I would probably I'd be playing a lot. today. I mean, that would be everything. That and gardening. For me now it's this and gardening. And then all the peripheral activities, like cooking.
Yeah, I saw a fish. A fish was caught with maybe a granddaughter or something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was, that was out at Lake Waco, and we're not going out to Lake Waco for at least the next year. They're going to have the whole thing shut down.
What? Really?
Yeah. When it floods like that, it went up 20 feet over normal.
Yeah.
And they'll have, you can't even, all the pavilions, the little playground areas and campgrounds and beaches, they're all the way up almost to the tops of the roofs.
Yeah, I went there the other day and saw it.
It's amazing. And all this debris washes in to those parks. And it takes, for some of the parks, it takes them years. Like the place where that fish was caught is Airport Beach Park. And that probably won't reopen for 2 years.
So they're not going to reopen it?
Right.
What?
Yeah.
We live right by the lake in Woodway. We have 2 kayaks. We take them out all the time.
Well, you're going to be able to get out there.
Oh, yeah?
Well, you should. Do you have public access there?
Well, there's like a little...
Is there a place you can park and put in?
Yeah.
Then you can get in.
All set? Okay.
Yeah. It's the boat ramps and things. And then the parks, where people swim and picnic and whatnot, those are all trashed now. Yeah. So they have to be completely... And a lot of those structures, those sun shelters, they have to tear off roofs and replace all the hardware, and a lot of those things get disassembled and then reassembled. And in the case of Airport Beach Park, it's one of the last ones, and that's the only place on the lake I fish. And I only fish there during the season. In the summer, too many people there, the water gets too hot, the fish move away, but they're spawning in there now. And so it's the one time. It's about a month-long period that I fished that lake. And that came from the one day I hit it. And, oh man, we tore it up. But, and I really want to get back, but I can't. Not unless I can find a place to get in with a kayak.
Okay.
So.
I know a place.
But I may have to find some new fishing territory working on that side of the lake. I hear it's good down there.
I wouldn't know. I don't think I've caught anything my whole life.
Really?
I mean, I'm just not a good fisherman. Yeah. We got all the gear. My son keeps asking. I have a little 5-year-old now. He's like, Dad, next Thursday on Daddy's Sunday, can we go fishing? I'm like, we can go fishing.
Do you ever go?
I've been.
Yeah.
I mean, I have
when they reopened the wetland, where the Waco wetlands are? Mm-hmm. They got flooded. So you couldn't get into them last week.
Okay.
I don't know when they're going to open it up, but they've got that little pond there where they've diverted water from the bosque that comes in there, and that's what floods the wetlands. I was in there before the rains with Ann. We go out there to walk regularly, and we came around that pond, and there are all these fish, easy this big.
Really?
And they're all tossed up in the big reeds and things. And they were blowing so much water through that big valve that the fish were getting shocked and getting washed up on the shore. And it was just this. So
it's a good place to fish?
They got fish in there now. Yeah. And it's wonderful because it's quiet, very few people. And they got picnic tables there. You sit under the tree, and it's great. It's a great place to fish. And if I go down and bring my kayak down there,
hey, let me know.
I'll fish with your 5-year-old.
Yeah. Maybe you could show us a thing or two. We can not be the blind leading the blind. Man. Well, this is maybe this is a good place to stop. There's a million things I want to ask you, but
well, you can come anytime. We can just talk again, and I want to find out more about this outpost pottery you got.
Yeah, you bet.
When I've been looking at what you're doing online. How long have you been doing that?
Well, I emailed you when we came back in 2018.
Right.
And then I think the next year, so I had just bought a wheel at that point. When we were living in Malaysia, I just bought this little Shimco Aspire.
Oh yeah.
The Nidec thing.
Yep.
and I'd take it up to the mountains. It was kind of my decompress time was on that little wheel. And I learned to center again after 20 years. And man, I just got bit by the bug. So that was kind of like I joked that it was my therapy.
Well, in a way, it is.
It really was.
Yeah.
I can share more stories, but man, it did really unwind me in so many ways. And we got back here and we realized, oh, well, we might be here for a while. I thought I started 2 companies, and the one that I stuck with was pottery because I just couldn't stop.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. But I kind of hit a niche of.
I didn't know you were doing that.
Yeah, it was hiding. I was definitely hiding in my garage for a good long season.
Well, it looks good.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, and that trimming the tiles.
Oh, using tiles instead of.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's been a blessing.
Wow.
And it's so cheap.
Yeah.
So that's our best seller. That really and it's nothing new. Potters have been making these things for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And I'm just the American that commoditized one little niche of it.
Well, I think what you're doing, from what I can see on your Instagram site, you are really filling a gap that has never been adequately addressed, which is getting this. There are so many people that want to do this.
Yeah.
Either vocation, avocation, doesn't matter. They want their hands in clay.
Yeah.
But they look at, well, how much does one of those wheels cost? Well, that's about
Right.
What do these things cost now?
Yeah,
these things are
$1,500.
They're closing in on 2,000.
Probably so, yeah.
And I was down at Armadillo Clay Supply down in Austin, and I went over and looked at their wheels, and they have the Shimpo Whisper, the VL Whisper there.
The nice ones.
And they're going for, it's got to be 2,000, 2,300 degrees, and they've got, Brent's making one now, a heavier one than the CXC, which I think is heavy enough for anybody.
Yeah, right.
And that thing's over $3,300.
Really?
For a wheel. So, and then you try to get a kiln, even a small electric kiln. And then if you get an old one, that's a great thing if it's in good shape and it's not too old that the parts aren't available anymore. Mm-hmm. Really, if you have a good electrician, which are increasingly hard to find, even a very old electric kiln, you could work out anything with it. But what you're doing is you're filling this gap you're doing these wheels that are totally affordable.
Yeah.
And giving reviews on them I've talked to so many students and so many parents over the 34 years I was at Baylor and doing the Arts Fest over there every year, demonstrating and talking to people who wanted to get started. And so how much is that? Well, if you can, it's like, well, if you can find a used one, because I wasn't even aware. I was so isolated that there were, and I don't even know if the products you're putting out, those wheels, if wheels like that were around at that time. I don't know, because it was always Brent and Randall and Shimpo and
Shimpo was the cheapest one I could find when I made when we started trying to do it. And then really soon after that 2018 time period, the Chinese started making these cheap wheels that look like the old boxy ones.
Yep, that's right. They were they were Shimpos, the old Shimpo. They still make that wheel.
Yeah.
They still make that wheel. But and those, I'd never seen those wheels that you had on Instagram before.
Oh yeah?
I'd never seen them. Huh. Yeah. Like, the hell is that?
You'd be shocked at how much money those things are making.
Wow.
Not for me, for the Chinese factories and the resellers that are making them.
Are you selling those wheels? Mm-hmm. Okay.
No, I wouldn't get much of that margin, I don't think.
Oh.
But they are.
Yeah.
But in Christmas time, it's like $500,000. It shows like the current velocity. And that's like a single product. So the color, this one, like, what in the world? There's a lot of people buying these little cheap wheels.
Wow.
So,
well, there's a place for them, and you can make good pots on those wheels.
Yeah.
I used one. I can't remember which one it was, but it was a real scaled down one. It didn't have real, speed. It didn't have that. It had 2 speeds, slow, medium, and worked like a charm.
Really?
Worked like a charm, yeah.
Well, let me ask you one more question related to this, because it touches on what you're bringing up, because I've gotten into the tool space and I've gotten into like, how do I support my addiction to keep doing this? So for me, it got into making tools and 3D printing and CNC machining tools and making videos and courses and that kind of stuff. And you alluded to, there was a season where you had to take a second job to keep the habit alive.
Oh, that was my whole thing. I mean, that's why I was at Baylor. That's why I taught. I was not going to teach. When I was in undergraduate school, I think I was a senior before I declared a major.
Really?
Yeah, because I just couldn't figure it out. I wanted to be in marine biology or wildlife biology.
Huh.
I wanted to be a forest ranger. I felt like I was probably going to have to be a professional musician, and I wanted to be a potter.
Huh.
And
that was what you were
and so I had a kid. I had a kid when I was 19, and I'm working. My wife and I were leapfrogging in school. One year she would go full time and work part time, and I would work full time and go to school part time. And then we'd flip it the next year.
Is this up in Iowa still?
This is in Chicago.
Okay.
Before I got to Iowa. And when I was my 20s, early 20s. Early 20s. But what the hell were we talking about?
Just supporting that you wanted to do it, but you're supporting these other jobs.
And it drove her crazy because I'm working minimum wage, no benefit jobs.
Right.
And she's saying, you got to commit to something, Paul. You've got to get a salary with benefits. You've got a family. I'm like, well, I can't. I got to commit to something. That means all this other stuff is off the table. I can't take anything off the table. And she finally said, look, you want to be in the studio? I said, yeah. She said, go to Northern Illinois University, get your degree in art, and get art education, get certification, get a job in a school. You'll be in a studio all day long. It won't be your studio, but you'll be in a studio.
Yeah.
And I said, the one thing I know I don't want to do is teach. I don't want to go into schools anymore. She said, you got a family to feed. I said, okay, I'll do it. So I did it. And I had no idea that the school I was going to had what was considered at the time, and still is considered, certainly in the top 5 best art ed program in the country.
Wow.
And so I got some serious training. But I still didn't want to teach, but I did land a job when I got out. And then this is another thing. Is this coincidence? Dumb luck, or is this a plan? I ended up, my first school that I taught in had a really good department. It was a big department. And we had a hearing impaired program. We were the only school that had a hearing impaired program in the state, only public school. And so every class I had students hearing impaired and their signers. Which was very interesting. But the faculty in that department, the art department, was phenomenal.
Really?
They were some of the finest teachers, and they cared about it. They were all formally trained art educators, and they knew methodologies. They knew how to develop curricula. They knew how to collaborate. They knew, it was just. And I looked around the first week I was there, just planning on being there the least amount of time possible. And I just went, oh, these guys are serious. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be here that long, but I will not be the weak link here.
Yeah.
I will not be. So I'm going to learn from them and I'm going to do this right. And I did. And by the time I got through about 4 years, I realized I would be doing it, you know. So,
wow.
And then, but so there's always been a job.
Yeah.
And when I got Illinois' economy in 1979 went in the toilet, and they fired. They didn't renew the contracts of every. You want a water?
I'm good.
Every non-tenured art, theater, and music teacher in the state in public schools. They got rid of them all. So, you know, I stopped making art because I ended up down here in the oil refineries on the Houston Ship Channel for 5 years. That's the only work I could get. So, and again, was I being led there? Because that was major chapter. Yeah.
Well, that'll be next time then.
Yeah. Wow. So, but there's always been a job. This is the first time since graduate school that this is all I do. So whatever job you do, whatever activities you engage in to make it possible for you to continue feeding yourself with this art form, get them as closely synced as they can.
Yeah.
If you want to believe in it, so you get some sustenance from that too. You know, most people don't sit down to a meal of one thing. You feed yourself, you nourish yourself physically by a little rice here, a little fish there, a little steamed asparagus there, you know, and they all, so this is my entree. But, you know, there are a lot of things that feed into that and support it. So, and I believe in all those things. So, but I don't think you're going to have a problem there. Because I think you're the kind of guy that just full immersion, you know,
thanks.
when you commit to something. So I see great things down your path.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It is so good to have you come over. I don't get conversations like this very often.
Well,
I'm afraid this one was too one-sided. But
well,
next time, you're going to do the talking.
All right, deal.
All right.